Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So thank you, TAPA, for inviting me. So today I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I think carries on from the themes that we had talked about this morning in terms of supply chain disruptions and how we use technology and digitalization to help us to be able to cope with the technology disruption. I'm going to talk a little bit slowly because to give people time to stream in, right? But this is what I do in classes. All right, so first of all, let me give you an overview of some of the macroeconomic and technology disruption I think that we have all faced in the last few years, and which unfortunately will probably continue into the near future as well. And then of course to look at how we can achieve supply chain resilience through the digitalization. So one of the things that, if you look at this conference, right, there's so many of us here, and I think one of the things that really happened, during the COVID period was, you can see, right, first of all, supply chain became a meme, right, meaning to say that it became the top of, management mind share. So typically, traditionally, supply chain logistics has been seen as a supporting industry, but because of what happened during COVID, you can see that there's a lot more, emphasis now on supply chain resilience, on diversification, on having supply chain visibility as well. So now it's at the top of management mind share and board mind share. And of course, the other thing that happened was, if you look at this Financial Times article, you can see that very clearly there's a move from what traditionally we think of as a just-in-time approach in supply chain towards what is now called a just-in-case. So in that sense, the just-in-case is very much based on, how do we ensure that, we are able to cope with disruptions. Of course, as I was discussing with some folks earlier on, right? We do not know how long this will last, but certainly there's very much a focus on the just-in-case aspect, meaning that how do we plan for the resilience and the continuity planning. So just some examples, right? And I'm sure a lot of us will be familiar with this. I had to wait for my PC for 4 months after ordering. My colleague had to wait 6 months, and this type of things typically didn't happen in the past. We were so used to going to a retail store and goods are available, but now there's a waiting time, there's a lead time for placing of orders, and actually that makes it more difficult for consumers, but also makes it more challenging for the businesses as well in terms of being able to predict lead times and being able to order their supplies and their products. If you look at what happened during COVID, this is from the US statistics, you can see that over here, in terms of the highest, there's a stockout for basically all categories of products. But in terms of where the biggest impacts were, the two largest industry sectors where the impacts were in the electronics and in the food sector. So in a way, it really mirrors what we ourselves have faced during the COVID period, right? In terms of food scarcity, because of lockdowns and food not being able to come out of pots or being harvested, and these are items that are perishable, and electronics, because of shutdown of factories or lockdown of factories, and all the shipping delays. Okay, and then of course, what we saw over the last few years as well in terms of inflation, and now the efforts to try and tame inflation. So you can see that from the historical low inflation, there was a fairly big jump, right, in the inflation that you see in the last 2 years. Okay, of course, then again, many of us come from freight forwarding and logistics companies, so high shipping rates. And the thing about shipping rates in the last 2 years, right, first was very low. Okay, it was very challenging because shipping rates were so low from the logistics and shipping companies' point of view, and then it shot up easily like 5 to 10 times, and the shipping lines were making a lot of money, and the freight forwarders were doing very well. But if you look at the trend now, it has gone back to pretty much the pre-COVID levels. So this is a chart as of actually 2022 up till early 2022. 2023, sorry. So you can see that between 2019 and 2023, okay, which is this year, freight rate shot up by 5 to 10 times, and then it has actually gone back to normal. So a lot of people will think that, oh, if it goes back to normal, it's good for the shipping industry. It's actually good for the shippers and manufacturers. But in terms of the volatility, actually, it also makes it harder for companies to predict their operations. And the reason for that is that, we would typically go for long-term contracts, so we'll sign a 1-year contract, or 2-year contract. And if we had signed at the peak of, the rates, right, thinking that it's going to continue like this forever, then, actually we are locked in on the longer term, high rates, at least for a period of time. So it may not always be a good thing when prices are so volatile, because then it makes it harder for businesses to plan long term, and be able to predict what will happen. Okay, and then of course, impact of Ukraine war on fertilizer, food prices, and energy prices. So obviously that contributes to the high cost of food as well. Okay, and energy prices. Okay, and the other thing, it was mentioned earlier on this morning, right, about climate change as one of the key impacts. So multinationals, many of the companies are also putting in place their own sort of sustainability goals. And in those sustainability goals, it also includes the suppliers that work with them, which will include the suppliers in Asia. So whether it's manufacturing or logistics providers, they would also have to show compliance to the sustainability goals. And, and that, of course, adds more complexity to how companies will have to manage their operations in order to fulfill some of these goals that the companies have put in place, and that they will specify as part of their sourcing requirements as well. Okay, then of course, talking about technology disruption, one of the things, of course, that we see in the last few years is that, if I ask, if we ask each other, right, who are the competitors in your industry, we will know who are the competitors in logistics industry, we will know who the competitors in automotive industry. We can define what these companies are, but the issue is always that, will new competitors come from outside of our industries? And this is actually 2 examples of what we see. Okay, so one chart says Tesla tops Toyota as an automaker with the largest market capitalization. So Tesla's sales are still smaller than Toyota and most of the large traditional car companies, but in terms of the potential, right, people think of it as having higher potential, and therefore it has a higher market valuation than these other companies. So a disruptor that comes from outside. And this is one of my favorite articles. Apple Watch, outsold the entire Swiss watch industry in 2019. So if you think about, Switzerland, we think that, oh, this is where Swatch is made. This is where the watch industry is. And we don't even think of Apple as a watch company. We think of Apple as iPhone and iPad, right? But just a single product like, the Apple Watch, outsold the entire Swiss industry. So competitors are coming from outside of our industry, and this is where, in a way, the fear for management is, okay, which is that you have disruptors coming from outside of our traditionally well-defined boundaries of what we define as our industry boundaries and the companies that we are very familiar with. Okay, so having said all that, right, what are some of the things that we can do, or what are some of the things that companies can do to sort of deal with all these different trends, both on the macroeconomic factors and as well as on the technology? I think if you look at this McKinsey report, okay, that was published in 2021, so they separated companies into 4 buckets, right? And they said, okay, companies that didn't adopt digitalization, and then companies that had some ad hoc trials, some companies that had piloted some projects, and companies that had use cases that they scale across different locations. So basically, 4 different buckets of companies with different levels of readiness in terms of their digitalization. And what they found was that companies that had at least some pilot cases or some use cases across different locations in their adoption of digitalization industry 4.0, were better able to respond to crisis during the COVID period. So no surprises, right? Meaning to say that the companies which adopted digitalization, were actually able to deal with the COVID disruptions better than the companies that did not, put in place any type of Industry 4.0 or digitalization initiative. So it was quite clear that the technology had an impact, in terms of their ability to cope with the disruptions. Right? Okay, so digitalization obviously is an important part of achieving the business resilience. Okay, so if you look at the driving factors, right? So we had macroeconomic changes of impact of technology. And, there are 2 things that companies can do, right? One is, on one hand, and I'm going to give a couple of examples. One is that, hey, can we use technology to improve our responsiveness? Can we use technology to improve our efficiency of the operations? Okay. The other aspect is, can we use technology to create new business models? Of course, for most of us, we will always think of technology as transformational and, creating new business models. But there's also, the low-hanging fruit. There's also the operational and productivity gains that we can achieve, by using technology to improve our operational efficiencies. Okay, and both cases, right, in terms of improving operation efficiency and creating new business models will, of course, lead to better business resilience, better supply chain resilience. So to achieve this, then, of course, digitalization is a big component of this, right, to provide that operational responsiveness as well as the new business models. And that, of course, will lead to the efficiency and productivity gains, as well as our ability to create new business models. So roughly, this is how I see the landscape, and I'm just going to share a couple of examples around this. All right, so I'm just going to share a couple of frameworks as well. So if you look at technology, I think the first thing to think about, and because we hear so much about technology and sometimes there's hype, right? So I just want to share, like, in terms of the Gartner adoption curve. So this is typically how technology goes through a cycle of adoption. There's a period of inflated expectations when everybody thinks, oh, this is going to be huge, right? So if you look at, for example, Bitcoin. Okay, went through that period of hype, and then there's a crash, and then now the prices start to go back up again. But it hasn't gone back up to the previous prices that it was, the previous highs that it was at. Okay, so same thing for 3D printing, same thing for AI. Of course, now AI is hot again. Okay, but AI has been around for 30 years. So a lot of these technology trends, go through this kind of cycle. So I think of it, as a dating cycle, right? So boy meets girl, fall in love, so high sparks, right? So peak of inflated expectations. Boy quarrels with girl, all right, and then you have a trial disillusionment. Okay, boy makes up with girl, okay, and then they get back together. Okay, and things get back to normal, but it's not as normal as when they first met and fell madly in love. Okay, so technology goes through that kind of cycle over a 15, 20-year period. And we see that throughout with different types of technology, right? E-commerce is the same thing. It started in the 1990s. Of course, today e-commerce is big. We talk about e-commerce, we talk about online taking over retail and online displacing retail. But, we should remember that e-commerce was nothing, until about a decade ago, right? When in the 2010s, when it really started to accelerate. So technology takes, to some extent, a 15, 20-year cycle to accelerate and really be transformational. So the good news behind that is that we have time to prepare. The bad news, of course, is that people don't see it until it's too late because, the effect is not immediate, right? So, we may not see the immediate impact so quickly, and that's why companies do not always rush to adopt technology. But over time, as the impact of the technology starts to come in, then that's where, the disruption to the businesses come, right? And therefore, we have to strike a balance between adoption of technology and watching the trends and being able to sort of take pilot steps to adopt the technology and grow together with these trends. Okay, the other framework that I would like to share with you, which I quite like in terms of looking at digitalization and transformation, okay, is this thing that's called the Smart Industry Readiness Index. So this was actually done by the Singapore EDB together with Tut Soot and McKinsey. Now it's actually being adopted as a global standard by the World Economic Forum. So I'm not trying to sell the framework, but I like the framework in the sense that it talks about 3 components. So I'm just going to use it to illustrate some principles of how I see technology transformation and technology adoption. So if you look at the 3 buckets on the top level, there's process, technology, and organization. So I think the first thing, for us, right, I think we understand process very well because I think we are all from the business units and we are the folks that do process. Okay, so first we must understand the business process. We must know what we are doing, okay, and then we think about using technology. Okay, so technology adoption is not about using technology per se. All right, so we must we must of course know how to use technology, but we must know what is the business process and how do we adopt the technology, the right technology, and adopt it appropriately into the business process. So that's number 1, right? And then of course there's also the organization, which a lot of times people forget about. Okay, but it's also a very important issue because in terms of change management, in terms of getting buy-in from the ground, in terms of getting buy-in from the management, I think for those of you who have gone through some of these technology adoption projects, these are all issues that we face, okay, or that companies face in terms of trying to get buy-in and trying to get adoption. So basically 3 ways, 3 pillars that we have to take care of, right? The business process, the technology that we use, and the people in the organization. The second thing, that I want to show, that I want to talk about, right, is that if you look at technology itself, there are 3 components under technology. So we hear a lot about AI, right? But I always tell people that the first thing, to think about is, first of all, we must be able to have connectivity and automation. So what does that mean, right? AI requires data. AI requires learning, right, of the data so that we can do prediction, so that we can do forecasting. But before we do that, we need to be able to have an integration of our operations. Okay, and that's where the connectivity comes in. So I look at it as a step process. Meaning to say that, first of all, we are trying to automate our process. So if we think about manufacturing line, we are using robots to automate the manufacturing line so that we can speed up the automation. Over time, as we get the efficiency gain, we say, hey, by the way, we want to monitor the robots on the shop floor without going to the factory. So that's where we have connectivity, that's where we have IoT, that's where we have devices connected to the robots, where we can check the utilization of the robots. That's why we have the dashboard of where we can see all the robots on the shop floor. At one point in time, we can see the utilization, we can see the KPIs. Okay, we can see the speed at which it's working. Okay, we can monitor the speed of the processes within the shop floor or within the logistics organization. Okay, with that dashboard, that means that we have connectivity. We are able to gather data real time. And as we start to gather data, then we can build intelligence on top of it. right? Building intelligence in terms of being able to predict what's happening, being able to forecast what's happening, being to use AI, right, or machine learning to be able to, have a better and more efficient operation. So this is a step process. First, we must be able to automate, then we must be able to connect and gather data and be able to share, gather data real time so that we can then, make better predictions and use the data appropriately. Okay, let me give you a couple of examples. So this is Williamson. So this is a 3D, this is a large international shipping company in bulk shipping. During COVID, as you all know, a lot of port disruption, a lot of difficulties in calling at ports because of workers, not being able to disembark from the ships, the crew not being able to disembark from the ships. So, one of the things, and of course, not being able to get spare parts as well. So one of the things that Williamson did was they experimented with using 3D printing for, for their ship spare parts, okay? And it was very successful, okay, in terms of what they were able to achieve with on-site, manufacture of spare parts. The other thing that you can see over here, this is in Singapore, okay, because of labor shortages, using robots for restaurant operations, okay? And the other thing about Nike is, the other example that I thought I'll share is, in a COVID year in 2021, Nike achieved its highest profit ever, okay, in its 50-year history. So I thought that was interesting, right? So in 50 years, they made the most profit, okay, even though it was a COVID year, even though 2021 is a year that retailers are all suffering, but Nike made its most profit. So what did they do? Okay, obviously they had a good integration of their online and offline operation. I'm running out of time. Okay, so I'm just going to show you the video. But in that video, you can see that they have actually integrated their storefront operations. Can we lower the volume a bit? So this video is actually a few years already. You know, this was done, I think, 2017 or 2018, right? So the whole idea is that, you know, they started all their digitalization efforts before COVID, right? And that allowed them to have all this mix of different types of operations together, okay? And I think that really helps them. Oops. Okay, yeah. So that really helped them in terms of you know, having, you know, the integration of all the storefront with the back end and you know, manufacturing and logistics processes. Okay, so I'll stop here. So thank you very much. You know, anyway, I'll be joining a panel discussion. So see you guys around.